Chapter 1. Omens in the Rain. The rain poured relentlessly, turning the streets into shimmering silver streams. Each droplet hitting the asphalt sounded like a distant drum, a rhythm heralding something ominous. John, clad in his black raincoat with an umbrella clutched tightly, walked briskly, sidestepping the forming puddles. But it wasn't the rain that troubled him. It was the eerie feeling of being watched, of not being alone in the night. As he crossed a street, he noticed a group of people standing motionless beneath a streetlight. Their gaze was vacant, as if entranced. A chill ran down John's spine. There was something profoundly unsettling about the sight, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Seeking refuge, he entered an old library he was familiar with. It was a serene place, a haven from the rain and the night's oddities. As he leafed through some old newspapers to pass the time, a particular article caught his eye. It spoke of an experiment conducted in a covert laboratory, an audacious attempt to defy death itself. But the article's date had been torn off, making it impossible to determine its age. Engrossed in his reading, a frail, quivering voice interrupted him. "You shouldn't be reading that, young man," whispered an elderly librarian, her eyes deep and wise. "There are tales best left in the past." John looked up, taken aback. "Why?" he inquired, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. "What's so perilous about this article?" The librarian leaned in, glancing around as if fearing eavesdroppers. "That experiment. It wasn't mere urban legend. I've heard whispers, tales of individuals altered after being declared dead. Rumor has it the lab still exists, hidden beneath the city." John's heart raced. His journalistic instincts urged him to unearth the truth, to delve deeper. "I need to know more," he asserted. The librarian gazed at him sorrowfully. "If you choose this path, tread carefully. Dark forces are at play, things the human eye shouldn't witness." But John was resolute. He had a lead, a story that could be groundbreaking, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. As he stepped out of the library, the rain had ceased, but the air still hung heavy with foreboding. John knew he was venturing into a realm of shadows and secrets, but he was prepared to face whatever lay ahead in his quest for the truth. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The sky was a heavy shade of gray, with clouds amassing in threatening formations, as if conspiring against the world below. John, his leather satchel tucked under his arm, treaded the city streets, each step echoing like a distant drumbeat. Every corner, every alleyway seemed to harbor a secret. He was hell-bent on uncovering the truth behind the experiment mentioned in the old newspaper. As he neared an age-old cafe, a female figure seated by the window caught his eye. She had chestnut hair and was engrossed in jotting down notes in a journal. Her posture was tense, as if on high alert. John approached cautiously, trying not to draw undue attention. "Excuse me, are you Dr. Sarah?" John inquired, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Sarah slowly lifted her gaze, her eyes deep and probing. "Yes, that's me, and who might you be?" "My name's John. I'm a journalist, and I'm digging for information about an experiment conducted in a covert lab. I came across an article about it, and..." Sarah cut him off with a hand gesture. "I know what you're referring to. I've noticed oddities in the city, too. People vanishing, then returning, altered." John's heart raced. Any clue what might have transpired? Sarah cast a wary glance around. "Not here. Follow me." They made their way to the dilapidated laboratory. The building stood like a behemoth of brick and rust, weathered by time. The entrance door was slightly ajar, a cold draft emanating from within. Inside, it felt as though time had stood still. Old notes, vials, and instruments lay scattered. But what struck John and Sarah were the photographs pinned to the walls. They depicted individuals with glassy eyes, mirroring the descriptions from the article. As they scrutinized the photos, a noise from the floor above startled them. Heavy footsteps, followed by a muffled moan. They weren't alone. Sarah clutched John's arm. "We need to hide," she whispered, her voice quivering. But it was too late. A figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes lifeless, skin pallid and decaying. It was a zombie, but not just any. John recognized it as an old childhood friend. The creature lumbered forward, emitting a guttural groan. Thinking on her feet, Sarah grabbed a vial from a table and hurled it at a window, creating an escape route. "John, now!" she yelled. With a mix of terror and adrenaline, John followed Sarah out of the lab, his heart pounding in his chest. As they retreated, the gravity of the situation dawned on John. The experiment wasn't mere folklore. It was real and had unleashed an evil threatening to engulf the city. With teary eyes, Sarah uttered, "We have to stop them. We need to find a way." John nodded, resolute. "We will, together." And so, as the rain persisted, two brave souls embarked on a mission to rescue their city from the engulfing darkness. Chapter 3. The Buried Truth. The sky was blanketed with gray clouds, and the falling rain felt like an endless lament. Streets lay abandoned, and the atmosphere was thick with palpable anticipation. John and Sarah walked side by side, their coats wrapped tightly around them, shielding from the biting rain. Each step echoed on the cobblestone, their shadows eerily dancing in the lamplight. As they crossed a square, a lone figure emerged from the shadows. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and eyes that had witnessed too much. He wore an old military jacket, bearing the weight of a tormented past. "Are you John?" he asked, his voice deep and gravelly. John nodded, eyeing him warily. "Who are you?" The man replied, "Name's Mike. I need your help." Sarah, with a questioning glance, inquired, "Why should we help you?" Mike hesitated, then answered, "My sister was involved in that experiment. After being declared dead, she came back. But she wasn't the same." A chill ran down John's spine. "What do you mean?" Mike looked down, a solitary tear tracing his cheek. It was as if she'd lost her soul. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak, just watched. Sarah covered her mouth, horror evident in her eyes. "Oh my God." Mike continued, "I started digging and found out the experiment was part of a government project. They aimed to create super soldiers, but something went awry." John ran a hand through his hair, grappling with the revelations. "We need to stop them. We have to find a way to halt the virus's spread." As they spoke, a muffled moan from a nearby alleyway drew their attention. It was followed by heavy footsteps. The trio turned to see a horde of zombies slowly approaching. Their eyes were glassy, their skin pallid and rotting. Their movements were clumsy, yet they were relentless. Mike pulled a knife from his belt, taking a defensive stance. "Stay behind me," he commanded. John and Sarah complied as Mike engaged the zombies. Each strike was precise, every move calculated. It was clear Mike was a trained soldier, but the horde seemed endless. Sarah, trying to assist, grabbed an iron rod from the ground, striking at the encroaching zombies. John, A mix of terror and resolve joined the fray, using anything within reach as a weapon. The battle felt endless, but eventually, with Mike's combat skills and John and Sarah's determination, they managed to fend off the horde. Catching their breath, Mike stated, "We don't have much time. We need to find a way to stop this virus before it's too late." John nodded, resolute. "You're right. We need to act now." Sarah, her eyes glistening, added, "And we need to do it together. It's the only way we stand a chance." The trio set forth, determined to uncover the truth and save the city from the looming darkness. And as the sky slowly began to clear, a glimmer of hope started to shine on the horizon. Chapter 4. The Final Dawn. The sky was a tapestry of stars, and the full moon bathed the city in a silvery glow. John, Sarah, and Mike sat in an old warehouse, surrounded by maps, notes, and aged newspapers. A kerosene lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls, filling the air with palpable tension. "We need a plan," John said, his eyes locked on the map of the government building. "The antidote is in there, I know it, but how do we get in?" With a determined look, Sarah answered, "I've heard there's an underground tunnel system connecting the building to an old, abandoned hospital. We could use it to sneak in." Mike nodded. "I served in that hospital when it was still operational. I know those tunnels like the back of my hand." John looked at Mike, astonished. "Why didn't you mention this before?" Mike hesitated, then said, "I didn't want to go back. Too many memories. But if it's the only way..." Sarah laid a hand on Mike's shoulder. "You're not alone. We'll do this together." After hours of meticulous planning, the trio was ready. Armed to the teeth and fueled by unyielding resolve, they set off toward the government building. As they ventured deeper into the tunnels, the air grew colder and damper. Each step echoed ominously, and the shadows seemed to harbor unsettling secrets. But they weren't alone. Along the way, they discovered old documents and notes revealing the truth about the experiment. The government knew the risks, but had continued for unknown reasons, perhaps for power, perhaps for wealth. One thing was certain: they had gambled with people's lives. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the government building. But they weren't alone. Shadows moved in the darkness, and eerie moans filled the air. The building's corridor was shrouded in oppressive darkness, broken only by the flickering light of an emergency lamp. The atmosphere was thick, charged with a sense of impending doom. John, Sarah, and Mike moved cautiously, each step resonating like a war drum. Mike, gripping a weathered baseball bat, moved with silent determination. The bat bore the scars of countless battles. Each nick and dent told a story of survival. Sarah, in her lab coat and carrying a bag full of vials and equipment, seemed out of place in this apocalyptic setting. But her gaze was steady and resolute. John, his camera hanging around his neck, was ready to document every moment, but he was more than a mere observer. He held a gun, ready to defend himself and his companions. Suddenly, a distant moan shattered the silence. Then another, and another, until the air was filled with a chorus of unsettling wails. The zombies were closing in. Mike took the front line, his baseball bat at the ready. At the first sign of movement, he struck with brutal force, taking down the approaching zombie. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, a horde of creatures advanced, their eyes vacant and mouths agape in a silent scream. Sarah, with surprising agility, pulled vials filled with a fluorescent liquid from her bag. "This should slow them down," she exclaimed, hurling the vials at the zombies. Upon contact, the liquid burst into blue flames, creating a firewall between them and the advancing creatures. John, with pinpoint accuracy, shot at zombies trying to circumvent the fire, covering Mike and Sarah's backs. Each shot was calculated. Every bullet mattered. After a fierce and bloody battle, the trio managed to repel the horde and locate the antidote. It was in a hidden safe behind a painting, guarded like the most precious treasure. But there was no time to waste. They had to administer it before it was too late. With trembling yet steady hands, Sarah connected the antidote to the ventilation system. "This should disperse the antidote throughout the city," she said, "but it will take time." The trio braced themselves for the final showdown. Zombies, drawn by the scent, were converging on them from all directions. But John, Sarah, and Mike were ready. The building's corridor echoed with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant wails of zombies. The atmosphere was tense, charged with agonizing anticipation. Every shadow seemed to conceal mortal danger. Every sound was an omen of death. Mike, his baseball bat now blood-stained, took the front line, ready to defend his companions to the end. Each movement was calculated, each strike an act of sheer determination. With every zombie he took down, a defiant roar echoed through the air, a refusal to surrender to the darkness. Sarah, her lab coat now dirty and torn, pulled more vials of fluorescent liquid from her bag. With surgical precision, she set up a series of chemical traps, barriers of fire and smoke that slowed the advancing creatures. John, gun in hand, shot with unerring accuracy, covering his companions' backs. Each shot was a bulwark against the darkness, each bullet a beacon in the night. But just when it seemed they might pull through, a tragic turn of events changed everything. Mike, while trying to protect Sarah from a group of zombies, was overwhelmed. One creature grabbed his leg, causing him to fall. And in an instant, he was surrounded. John and Sarah, their eyes filled with horror, watched as their friend and comrade was engulfed by a swarm of the undead. Sarah, her eyes glistening with a mix of rage and despair, pulled out one of her last vials, a concentrate of highly reactive chemicals. With a swift and decisive motion, she hurled it into the midst of the horde. The ensuing explosion was devastating, a blazing inferno that consumed many of the zombies in a hellfire of flame and ash. But despite the explosion creating an opening, it was too late for Mike. The zombies had reached him, and his brave sacrifice bought John and Sarah the precious time they needed to escape. As the blue liquid dispersed into the air, the zombies began to drop one by one, like puppets with their strings cut. The city, shrouded in darkness for far too long, was finally seeing the light. Dawn broke, its golden rays illuminating a world forever changed. John and Sarah, the weight of loss heavy in their hearts, stepped out of the building, looking out at the awakening city. The battle had been won, but the cost was steep. John, camera in hand, knew he had a story to tell. Not just of the battle, but of Mike's sacrifice. Not for fame or glory, but as a warning. A warning that even in the face of the darkest abyss, humanity has the strength to fight and to hope. And as the sun rose, he began taking pictures, determined to tell the truth to the world, to honor Mike's memory, and to ensure his sacrifice would never be forgotten. If you're eager to dive into more tales like this, stories that will make you feel every emotion, every chill, every suspenseful moment, then, my friend, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel and embark on this journey. You won't regret it.